measured out the universe, and you made me. Echoes of the voice that called worlds to be. Reach through the ages and now speak to me. You're my creator king. You made the valleys and the skies, displayed your love on far horizons, and before my eyes, you lit the stars and set the dawn in time, called them all by name, and now you whisper mine. You're my creator king. And who am I that you are mindful of me? Yeah. Who am I that you set your love on me? You're my creator king. You made the darkness and the light, sun and moon to watch the day and guard the night. The hand that stretched the heavens like a canopy reaches down to cover and watch over me. You're my creator king. You're my creator king. You're my creator king. You're my creator king.
This is our third meeting, and I can see that there are some that have joined us on Discord. I hope that you can hear okay and see everything. Today, we're going to be talking about, we are going to be comparing the perpetual week with Yahweh's week. There's a lot that, it's hard to get that out of our heads. We've been brought up with thinking that the week is always continuous and therefore it has to have been from the beginning. So I'm going to be going through this to help you get out of that rut if possible, okay? We have been learning that Yahweh's timepiece or calendar uses all three elements, the sun, the moon, and the stars. If we can all agree that all the instructions set down by Yahweh do not contradict each other, then we can continue unlearning the following subject: the misconception of the continuous, unceasing week, which is separate from everything else on his calendar. I'm going to walk slowly through the pattern of the continuous week we have thought we were following as his design. First, we need to take a good look at the idea that Yahweh set the creation week in place as the dominant and supreme piece of his calendar. In the first place, the week was not the first timepiece set in place. The first timepiece was the day. The creation week is made up of individual days created one day at a time. The word week is not even used in Genesis 1. In fact, the very first time this word is used is not until Genesis chapter 29. And this has to do with the wedding week, the 7 days for a wedding week. We have but one day at a time to live, and even that is really more than we can count on. Actually, the supreme amount of time we are allowed is the second. There are approximately 60 heartbeats per minute and around 20 breaths per minute. Just stop the heart for 5 seconds and feel the effects on your body. Or stop breathing for a few minutes and life begins to pass by. All facets and elements of time must be taken into consideration when keeping track of appointed times. We need to look at every one of his instructions to see how time does fit together. Time builds upon itself, starting with the smallest increment given to man to live in: seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years. The one increment that is the least mentioned in Scripture is the week at 28 times. The next in line is our moment instant at 115 times, followed by a month with 353 times, followed by a year mentioned 871 times, and the majority of those is the generational births and deaths. The final increment mentioned at a whopping 2,692 times is the day. Let us just start with a calendar setup that is the center of this perpetual week belief. Let's start with chart 1. Okay, here we can see the continuous week, just like we think it is from creation. I have 5 weeks in a row. All looks pretty good and flowing nicely. Okay, let's just read some of the scriptures from the Word on the special days he wants us to observe. Let's start with the month. Exodus 12. This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Exodus 13. On this day you are going out in the month of Eve. Exodus 40. On the first day of the first month you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Numbers 28. At the beginnings of your months, you shall present a burnt offering to the Lord. Remember, Yahweh's month consists of no less than 29 days and no more than 30 days from sliver sighting to sliver sighting. The word month used in Hebrew refers to the moon, whether sliver or duration in days. The words moon and month are interchangeable. So let's use a month of just 29 days on the creation week model. We will place new moon day, which is the first day of the month, on day 1 of the first week, just to keep it easy to follow. Let's go to chart 2. Okay, new moon day is the first day counted of the month. The blue numbers are the month days counted, and the black are the 6 work days with the 7 in red for Sabbath day in the perpetual week model. Everything seems to fit nicely. So far, so good. Let's go to chart 3. Now, let us add another month to this. So we will have a total of 9 weeks in a row. Remember, this is Yahweh's month we are setting on this perpetual week calendar. He instructed this pattern of a month to keep track of the special days. All of his special days he wants us to celebrate are a certain day in a month he proclaims. Remember, month is moon in Hebrew. A month is a lunation period of 29 to 30 days. Also remember, new moon day is day 1 in counting the days for that month. Okay?
I think we might just have a little bit of lag. Let's give it a
Okay.
couple seconds to catch up. There we go.
Okay. On the evening At sundown on the 29th, the moon is sighted, and a new month starts the very next day. Okay, so everything looks like it fits perfect according to what we know so far with Yahweh's instructions of counting the month. If you look at this chart, you can see in the first week on day 1, you see the NM, that's new moon day. And then you go down to the 29th day, that's when the moon would be sighted. And then new moon day would be on the second day of the 5th week here on my chart here. You can see the NM, okay? Everything looks like it fits perfect according to what we know so far with Yahweh's instructions of counting the month. Okay, let's bring in another instruction by Father for specific days to be observed. Ezekiel 46:1 says, "Thus says the Lord God, the gateway of the inner court that faces toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened." Now Yahweh is getting more specific. Let's add these instructions to the proper place on our calendar so far. I will use an O for open and S for shut. Let's go to chart 4. Okay, we are starting to see some problems with this calendar of perpetual 6 work days and the Sabbath. New moon has to be placed somewhere on one of the days, and Yahweh has instructed that day to have the gate open. By following the order by Yahweh in Ezekiel 46, you now have the dilemma of upsetting your 6 working days in a row. What do? Open the gate or shut it? This is only one of Yahweh's orders. I will now add another of Father's instructions, which affects the days on this calendar, Leviticus 23. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. Okay, let's use the month of Aviv from the year 2020 as our model for the instructions in Leviticus. Let's go to chart 5. Okay, new moon day landed on Thursday, March 26th. That is the 5th day of the perpetual week pattern. The P is Passover night. The UN- number indicates the unleavened bread days, and the bold UN and the bold UN1 and UN7 are the holy convocation days. The FF is first fruits day, or the waving of the sheaf. The FF is on the 3rd week, the 6th day. You'll see it at the top right by the 6 if you can't see too well. Okay, now it starts getting very interesting. Look closely at what is happening here. You now are dealing with 3 of the days that are supposed to be of the perpetual 6 work days, and then the Sabbath day to make up the sovereign creation week model. And Yahweh has placed special commands on them. You have new moon day right on the 5th workday spot, again, causing the dilemma of open gate or shut gate. You then have a commanded non-work day on the 15th day of the month, which lands on the 5th workday of the week, and on the 21st day of the month, which lands on the 4th workday of the next week. Let's try one more scenario with using this perpetual week calendar. First, remember that the instructions from Yahweh are firm. What he has said is his law. Yahweh said no work was to be done on his Sabbath. Okay, next let's look at the attack on Jericho, Joshua 6. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the seventh day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. Okay, let's look at chart 6. They marched around Jericho once for 6 days in a row. On the 7th day, they marched around Jericho 7 times, then shouted, blew trumpets, and the city fell down. The marching and day to attack numbers are in green. Right off the bat, we have a problem. The command to keep Sabbath holy has been violated. They acted on what is the Sabbath on this calendar. Even if you move the first marching day to another day, you still deal with the Sabbath in the mix of marching days in full armor, which indicates to the enemy an aggressive position. In the book of Jasher, chapter 88, it says they started the march on the first day of the month, or new moon day. Now I'm asking you to please bear with me here. Let me put this on the calendar according to the new moon day not being a part of the work days, just as in Ezekiel 46. Let's look at the next chart. Now on this chart, the black numbers in red 7 is the perpetual unceasing calendar month. The blue NM and numbers top right are the days according to a lunar month, with new moon day standing alone at the beginning. The brown numbers are the marching days. You can observe that with the constant perpetual week, you end up fighting or marching in full armor on the Sabbath, the red 7 top left in box. This is against the instructions of Yahweh. However, if you see that in Jasher, they started the siege of the city on New Moon Day, which is not one of the 6 work days counted according to Ezekiel 46, or the Sabbath day, they could march for 6 days and attack on the 7th, then rest the following day, which would be the Sabbath day. You can see that it is not Yahweh's calendar that messes up the works. It is the perpetual week idea that does. Father is not going to give instructions for his appointed days that contradict his calendar structure. Remember, if you claim the creation week as the model we are to stay on, then that makes the 6 working days just as important to keep in place as the 7th day rest. Let's look a little further at the calendar set in place by Yahweh from the beginning. His timepiece includes all 3 systems created on the 4th day. The sun, to regulate a day for working in, from sunrise to sunset. The moon, to announce the beginning of a new month and counting off that month's days by its waxing and waning. The stars help keep the cycle of a year by the sun's revolution through the constellations. This is shown at Passover by the sun being in the constellation of Aries, as spoken of by Josephus. And the sun is in the constellation Virgo, starting on New Moon Day, Day of Trumpets, of the 7th month of Tishri, as referred to in Revelations. The moon on Father's calendar is for his appointed times. His month always has 4 Sabbath weeks. Let's go to the next chart. Let's look at Ezekiel 46 again. I would like to show a very interesting set of instructions by Yahweh. 46:1 again. Thus says the Lord God, the gateway of the inner court that faces toward the east shall be shut 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened. Ezekiel 46 is a fascinating chapter. Right here in the first verse is where Yahweh shows how his calendar keeps the 6 work days and the 7th rest, and new moon day, the first day of the new month, in constant running to keep track of his Sabbath weeks. What do I mean? Let's continue in Ezekiel. The prince shall enter by way of the vestibule of the gateway from the outside and stand by the gatepost. The priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings. He shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go out, but the gate shall not be shut until evening. Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the entrance of this gateway before the Lord on the Sabbaths and the new moons. When the prince enters, he shall go in by way of the vestibule of the gateway and go out the same way. This is his perfect calendar template, like a pendulum keeping the perfect beat of time, and he made it an intricate part of his holy temple, the eastern gate. Now comes, to me, the amazing part. But when the people of the land come before the Lord on the appointed feast days, whoever enters by way of the north gate to worship shall go out by way of the south gate. And whoever enters by the south gate shall go out by the way of the north gate. He shall not return by the way of the gate through which he came, but shall go out through the opposite gate. The prince shall then be in their midst. When they go in, he shall go in. When they go out, he shall go out. All the other appointed feasts will use the north and south gates to enter for worship. You see, the gate that faces toward the east is in the constant mode of open for new moon day and Sabbath and shut for the other 6 work days, thus keeping the monthly calendar running smoothly in counting days of the month, starting with new moon open, the working days shut, and Sabbath open. The gate of the inner court that faces east keeps all Yahweh's undefiled Sabbath weeks in order. What do I mean by undefiled Sabbath weeks? Listen to this in Leviticus 23. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. The word complete in the Hebrew means without blemish, whole, undefiled, perfect. I have to ask, how do you not defile the 7 Sabbaths? By following the pattern Father set down at the eastern gate, 6 work days and the Sabbath. The other appointed times do not affect the status of the timepiece. They just fit in where Yahweh places them. On those days, the north or south gates are used. The gate facing east always keeps the open or shut sequence. The basic days used for Yahweh's calendar piece are new moon day, open, the work days shut, and the Sabbath open. The main timepiece Yahweh deals with is the day, and he places his appointed times on any one he chooses to put his signifiers in place for us to watch for events of the times we are in. I have put together a rather interesting picture of the pendulum swing of Yahweh's timepiece using the calendar frame we are used to. Let's look at the final chart. Imagine a pendulum of a clock starting at the farthest position on the right at the new moon day, and then swinging from right to left, coming to its farthest position on a Sabbath at the left and returning to the right position at the next Sabbath, and so on for the 4 full weeks, the whole month, until again starting at the next new moon day. This is truly a unique timepiece. Okay, listen to this very interesting quote found by Zen, Writings of Abraham, chapter 29. We journeyed slowly for the sake of the women and children, and we journeyed not upon the Sabbath day, nor upon any of the holy days, for we thought it better to worship the Lord our God according to the pattern of heaven, that to proceed rapidly upon our way. And we did know that the Lord prospered us in our journey and protected us from the power of all our enemies, because we did faithfully serve him and worship before his throne according to the divine pattern. This writing reveals that Abraham knew the appointed days of Yahweh before the children of Israel came to the mountain of Yahweh at Sinai. He also understood the calendar Yahweh created. He called it the pattern of heaven. I've put a lot of this information of Yahweh's calendar timepiece in my book, Yahweh's Unique Timepiece Explained. So much more epiphany moments to revelations from Father have come to me since the conference last September that I've begun to compile this in a second book, a part 2. Are there any? Okay, so at this time, if there's any questions, if I've gone too fast on something, or
Let's invite everyone that is joining in Discord. Feel free, you can unmute your mics. We would love to hear if you have any questions. Feel free to speak and treat this as an open mic discussion. But we did have one question from Digital Warrior Bride. Does Joshua 10:13 alter Yah's calendar cycle?
according to walking through all the stuff that Enoch says, and this is way before Joshua, and I have been tracking since 2017 the calendar, the days of each month, when new moon is, and when it was sighted and everything, and it hasn't really changed. I can't. So far, I saw that too, and I thought, okay, where has it changed? And it really hasn't. It still is following all what Enoch actually talks about. It is still following that, which really it was kind of like an epiphany to me, like, oh my goodness, it's still the same. It hasn't changed. Enoch did say, he said that he was shown this from heaven, and it was to be this way from eternity to eternity until the new, I think his new created world or something endureth forever. So from eternity to eternity until he brings in the new, when he says, I make all things new. I mean, that's what Enoch was saying. So I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you for that answer. We had another question from Trent Stevenson. In antiquity, a year was composed of 360 days and actually began on March. Why was the solar year invented?
Actually began in March. That again, you're going by a pagan calendar. God's months do not follow March, April, May. It doesn't follow that. If you notice, when you're following an actual month of his, it's in between months, or it's combined. It's using 2 months of that. That is the Roman Gregorian calendar, and so using those months, you can't follow those. You've got to follow God's. And Enoch, yes, he said 360, but he also said 364 because he said there were 4 days that did not move in the sections that God had placed them on. They were commanded to stay. And that was the days that the sun actually would come back on. I've got a chart, and it's going to be in my second book, that shows you the course of the sun. And it shows you, yes, there are 360 days, but then there are 4 days that the sun actually doubles back on and goes through, and it's the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices. The 2 equal days and the 2 days, one where it's the longest day and one where it's the longest night. And they are added, and Enoch talks about those, and that's why he talks about there then being a 364, because you add those 4 corner pieces to it, and it becomes 364. But the sun, he says, it completes, it is actually 360, but the 4 make it 364. I know that's hard to understand, but if you read Enoch over and over again, pretty soon all of a sudden the light will go on and go, oh, okay, I understand what he's talking about.
So in your opinion, how does that calendar, that timing of the year, correlate with Revelation, speaking of 3.5 years as 1,260 days, which would make each year 360 days? Do you think that those extra 4 days would just be added in that count?
Again, if you notice, it says days. God's dealing with days, and how he deals with days. I mean, there's so much. I keep learning and new things that come out. I don't know if you can just break it down into years that way, because he's constantly talking about days. Like I said, it's a whopping 2,692 times day is used year isn't, years aren't that many times. Most of them have to do with the generational births and deaths that word is used. Otherwise, it's usually moments, instants, days, and months that are used the most. So I really don't, on that one, I'd have to really start looking at that more to even connect it with years. I prefer keeping it in days.
It says 1,260 days, 42 months,
Mm-hmm.
3.5 years. So it would even make it seem like whatever calendar John was using in that prophecy and Revelation was thinking of even maybe a 30-day month. It's interesting to fathom, but yeah, I would love to, if you could get back on.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that more.
We had another question from Trent. He said, "It's been my understanding that the Europeans fixed the Chinese calendar. Are you familiar with the Chinese calendar? And, the Chinese are so smart, I wonder why they would have gotten it wrong."
There are so many calendars. It'd make your head spin if you got on and started looking at how many different calendars come up. The Chinese lunar calendar has to do with all of their festivals and stuff. It's not their civil calendar. The civil calendar is actually the Gregorian calendar. It is. I've got a whole thing in my fourth book that talking about that. I can bring that out in one of our talks and read it to you about that. They go by the civil, all countries, they use that calendar to keep commerce going. So they know how to follow commerce, but each country practically has its own religious calendar. And a lot of them are lunar or lunar based or lunisolar based. And it's around their festivals that they use it.
Very interesting. So that's all the questions that we have thus far. Please feel free if you do have any questions in Discord. I can't monitor the chat right now, but please feel free to voice it over the voice chat. We would love to hear your questions and even hear your voice. But I noticed you gave my dad a pamphlet or a pretty large amount of work that you were working on earlier. Yeah. Would you like to share any of the updated information that you've been researching?
That's what I was talking about. I went back into Enoch. Zen had given me a whole big thing. He walks through the illumination parts in Enoch, talking about the sun and the moon, and he gives explanations, commentary after certain sections to try and help people understand. And I put that in the book, a section there from Zen, and it's going to be in the second book for those of you who bought the book from the conference. It doesn't have it. My one that's out right now has part of it, but I'm even finding more stuff. And these charts that I gave him, I have them according to the year, Father's year, where it starts in Aviv and ends in Adar. All right, going through there, and it's like 2017 through 2018, because right in the middle of Father's year, the Gregorian year changes in January and they start their new year, but Father's year hasn't changed yet until Adar, which is just right before the spring equinox when his new year begins in Aviv. So it's hard to connect the Gregorian calendar with his, but I gave him all the charts to Zen to look at to see how everything fit, because I started realizing there's more than just the counting, looking at the grain, the Aviv, to start the new year. And I was reading in Josephus, and Josephus has a part in there talking about the Passover, that the Passover is when the sun is in Aries. And I thought, okay, here's another piece of the puzzle. So I pulled up Stellarium and started watching and realizing just how off the Jewish calendar is. They're not, you can bet they're going to be adding a month, an Adar 2 at the end of this year. They're going to be adding one because they have to. It's just getting too far off. Just by what I was following, we should be, this should be Sivan that we're just coming into. They're coming into Tammuz, and this really should be Sivan with the information I found. I also, because there is another part it's in Revelations that talks about a sign in the heavens, a woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet, under her feet. If you look on Stellarium, if anybody has that program, if you bring that up, when that happens, that is right at new moon for the 7th month Tishri. Every year that comes up. So that's another anchor that's there. And so that's the sign, is that the sun, she must be clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet. And you can actually see that, and they both coordinate. You can get Passover with the sun being in Aries, and you can get, and then through the year you get down to Tishri, and sure enough, Virgo is clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet. And so they're like two anchors that God has put in the constellations. That's why you've got to have all of them. He uses all of them, the sun, the moon, and the stars, for his calendar, his timepiece. And then I put on a chart all the explanation that Enoch talks about what happens, how many, the suns. Now this is the suns, this is not the moon. The moon is more irregular. The moon has 6 months of the year, 29, and 6 months of the year, 30. But you don't know what pattern that's going to come up until you sight the moon. But it happens every single time that you have the 354 days, just like Enoch said, at the end of the year. And then when you add a month, you have to add, you get another month in there, then it brings it back into sync with the sun, because you got to keep it there, because God said that the Aviv must be ready. The barley crop must be ready in the spring for Passover, for first fruits. So he's put those anchors in there, and it's just interesting to see all that Enoch was showed. It fits. And so I made a chart of the course of the sun through a year, through the where it talks about going through the different gates, and the 4th gate, 5th gate, 6th gate, and going through there, and how many days he says. And I put it on a chart, and it fits. It's an amazing thing. This is also going in my second book. I will have this chart in there for people to see when he's talking about this. There's 91 days in this quarter, and that's what he's talking about. It goes 30, 30, 31, and that one extra day is either at the equinox or at a solstice that is in there. That's why it's there. It's that extra day that is the anchor for that season, to show the coming of a new season. So it's kind of hard to explain all of it. It was, it's quite a
great information. In that, you mentioned Enoch, and we call this the Enochian Calendar class, right?
Yeah.
So we had a question from sent back 1978. They said, I heard there are different versions of Enoch. How do I find and trust the true content?
Boy, I don't know. I don't know of all the versions. Your Zen knows about 2 of them. They're pretty much the same. It's just some of the wording, or they may have one part where they say this is corrupted and we're going to replace it with this. But when it comes to the actual luminary parts, they're pretty much the same in that area. There's not a lot of difference. They may change some of the wording in one of his parables or one of his prophecies, but they're very, very close. At least in the 2 that I've looked at, there's not a whole lot of difference. One is easier to understand than the other, because it's who interpreted is what it is, of who interpreted how to write it. So,
yeah, my dad actually put together a book that's available at sacredwordpublishing.com called The Collected Works of Enoch the Prophet. And he actually takes all the existent manuscripts of Enoch and puts them together in one side-by-side narrative, so that you can read and allow the Holy Spirit to discern for you which is truth. And what Sister Diane is saying is that, just like you see in the Aramaic Targum or the KJV or the Masoretic, text, the bulk of the manuscript agrees with itself. There's just maybe some slight differences that were changed by scribes over time. But there are, the 2nd book, the 3rd book, the 4th book of Enoch. So a lot of those things, you have to pray over and allow the Holy Spirit to guide you. But yeah, that text, The Collected Works of Enoch the Prophet, is a really awesome work, in my opinion, that puts them all side by side. So we had another question from Carol Kent. And it's regarding where exactly are we on the calendar right now?
Well, if I go with what I have taught, and I don't, I don't push it on anybody, but we have gone ahead, and this is again Savan for us. Okay, we've just begun it. Saturday was New Moon Day, which started the new month. Now, on the calendar that everybody's looking at, they're calling that the fourth month or Tammuz. But according to what I started looking at with Aries and with Virgo, and seeing how it fit, and even with what Enoch was saying, I realized, okay, we should have already added a new month. So we actually backed up. And this is Savan for us, which means that we will recognize Shavuot again, which will be June 20th, Sunday, June 20th. So that's about where we are. And I'm hoping, I can get this information, I can get these charts out. If anybody really wants them now, before I put the book out, they say, really like to see your calendar charts. If you get on to my Diane ISA 5812 at gmail.com, and send me a message that you would like them, then I can send them back to you so you have them so you can study them. I have no problem with you having those. In fact, if you're interested, the more information I can get in your hands, the better, because I like people to know this is, what God has shown us. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. For everyone that is joining in Discord, I just realized that Discord had automatically server muted everyone other than Diane. So you can speak now. Please feel free to join us in conversation and to share your questions. I'm so sorry about that. I wasn't aware that happened. We did have another question from the YouTube chat from Living! Exclamation point. Living! They said, is this following of the calendar a separation of the wheat and tares in the last days?
That's a really good question. I would say it's sure a good, it is bringing out God's remnant. There's only going to be a remnant that is actually going to be able to know when his times really are, and we have to be ready to hear his voice. We have to be willing to change our thought process of what it used to be and ask him to open it up, because it's been hidden. It's been hidden. We have been born in Babylon, and all we have ever known is Babylonian ways and rules, and I really do think it is a awakening of the bones. God wants his bones to awaken. He's the one doing it. And he will put the sinews and the muscles on, and he will blow his ruach in that body and bring it together. So I just say that too. Don't get worried if someone starts arguing with me. Don't try and convince anybody. Just do your own research and step forward and grab God's hand. We go through the gate one at a time. We don't take anybody with us.
Yeah, and we're only worthy because of his grace.
Right.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for that answer. We had another question from Ezra.
Hello, Ezra.
Ezra says, I understand that the Battle of Jericho had to count a new moon day in order to not break Sabbath. But what about all the other battles and wars in the Bible?
They wouldn't fight on the Sabbath. There's actually another one that shows the same scenario, but only if you know understand what's going on with Joshua and see that in Joshua, you know what's going on. And it's in Kings. It's talking about when they at the beginning of the new year, they go out to battle and they set up their camps. And on the seventh day, they engage in the battle. You know that had to have been New Moon Day that they started setting up their camps to get ready for the battle. And on the seventh day, that would have been the last work day, the last day before the Sabbath. And that's when they engaged in battle, and they quit. They rested on the next day. It's in Kings. I'd have to look it up to be able to read it. And unless you really understand oh, this is exactly what happened in Joshua. And you're not, a lot of people don't get it. They don't see it. The more you study this, the more things start popping out at you and you understand the language more. But it's in there twice. But the other battles, they wouldn't. If you even look at when the people repented and came to Moses and said, okay, we're going to go up. We'll fight them. We were wrong. And Moses said, don't go. Yahweh's not with you. Don't go. What stayed back in the camp with Moses when they went to fight? The ark. Whenever the ark went with them, there was no Sabbath. They were not fighting on a day that God would not approve. The ark stayed in the camp, and the ark stayed back in the camp with Moses, and they went up and fought and were defeated. So you have to look at all these little tiny things like, where's the ark? Do they have it with them? Okay, it's not a Sabbath.
Oh, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question from Lady at Triona. My question is, how do we apply this to our lives? It seems so complicated. How do we honor the Sabbath in a world that doesn't allow us to rest?
You have to make a determination. I know it's difficult, and some have asked me, well, what do I do? My job, I can't, how do I, handle this? And what I tell them is, if you really believe that this is God's true calendar, acknowledge it. And when you feel bold enough, approach your boss and say, I would like to change something. We have a guy that meets with us on the Sabbath that we meet on. He made the determination. He went and talked to his boss and said, this is what's going to happen. Now, I will work on all other days. If you don't have people on Christmas, I'll work. He's telling him all these times he will work, but his Sabbath will change every 29 to 30 days. And his boss said, well, you're such a good worker. I got no problem with it. And if you work on a Saturday when others weren't, got no problem with that. You work on a Sunday when no one else will, I got no problem with that. Just tell me ahead of time when these Sabbaths are coming. What day is it going to land on? And he's been doing that for, how many years has he been doing that, Danny?
8 years.
8 years. And there's been some others that have commented the same way. You work it out with God. You work it out with God and see what he is asking you to do, how he wants you to handle it. Because we do live in Babylon. We're not in the land. And it's hard. It's really hard trying to follow God's ways when we live, in such a world as we do.
Absolutely. And that is the last question that I see about the calendar in the YouTube live chat. For everyone that is joining in Discord, I realized finally that Discord is automatically server muting you, even though I unmuted you. So I'm going to have to go back after the class and check out the settings. I'm so sorry about that, but thank you everybody for joining in. It's lovely to see everybody joining in the Discord server.
Yeah.
Any last words for?
Yeah, I do. I wrote this when I was writing this. I do know that there's a lot of times that people come in and they scoff and complain or something of what we're talking about, and even say, they're just trying to sell books. And I wrote down something I would like to read for everybody. I would like to make my position clear to all you who are listening. When I began down this road set before me by my Father Yahweh, I struggled and strived to uncover the truth from him. In this journey, he would open doors to information I never thought existed. He started filling my plate with so much revelation and quotes from so many sources, I thought I would explode if I couldn't show anyone else this treasure load. Nobody I wanted to reveal this to wanted to listen. They didn't want to leave the comfort zone they were settled in. The only avenue I saw available was to write it all down. I did not see myself as a writer, but Yahweh also wanted this out in the hands of his children who were searching more from him. So he put this fire in my bones that I could not contain, and the only relief was to start writing thoughts down. He would give me the start of a sentence in the middle of the night. If I did not get up because I was too comfortable in bed, by morning the thought was gone, and I would struggle to remember what it was. After a few times like this, I repented and said, Father, I will get out of bed from now on when you reveal something to me, no matter what time it is. After that, things started coming together better, and eventually a book was the results. Father has commissioned me to get this truth out to the ones with fertile ground to plant in. So he led me to Zen, who had the means to get the book into people's hands. I am grateful for the wonderful relationship that is developed with the Garcias and us. Father has directed their path to develop many platforms for him to use for the messages he wants heard. He wants to bless his people, and they have bowed themselves before their Creator and said, please use us. When you step out in front of the crowd, many times you feel the wind from tomatoes whizzing by to try to stop the messages. I know Zen has been on this stage. To be accused of just trying to sell books to make money is a big tomato. All we want is to fulfill the mission Father has placed before us, to get the truth out there. I am willing to take time and answer any questions at any time. I know Zen is the same way. Putting out all the classes and discussion groups and interviews on different platforms is proof of this. When you have all this information and the same questions are asked time and again, it's just easier to direct people to a book that has the information in one place. What people need to understand is that in this society, it takes money to do what they do. The sale of books helps support all of it. A portion is designated for ministries they support. There is equipment they must have to broadcast. It costs to publish and print everyone's books, and I don't know all that is needed to keep it up and running. I've said all this to say this. All I want is to accomplish the task Yahweh has given me, to get his truth out to his children any way I can. I know this is Zen's mission too. When we explain what it is in the books we have written, it is to let you know what is available for your continued research. Blessings to all of you.
All right, thank you everybody for joining. We'll see you next time. Shalom all.
Shalom.